Primetime on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Juan, Cotto touching bases with you from the shores of Lake Washington in Leschi, Washington. Overseeing a beautiful gray afternoon. It was beautiful this morning, Mick, when I went on my walk, but the clouds have come back and bringing back with it winter splendor here in the Pacific Northwest. First of all, the first show of the year, we want to say happy 2026. Happy New Year to everyone, and hope that 2026, I am honestly hoping that it is your best year wherever you listen to and follow this from. We're hoping nothing but for the best of you and for your families and for you folks that are involved in education and our athletic administrators. We wish you nothing but the best. And certainly, Mick, that goes for you too. Welcome, my friend. Great to see you again. Happy 2026.
Yeah, great to see you. Great to be back.
Mick, I had one of those father and son moments Sunday evening. I came back from visiting my mom down in Federal Way, and Clemente left on Thursday, and he came back from a visit to Redlands College down in California, met with the track coaches, met with the baseball coaches, took a tour of the campus, a variety of different projects, some friends of ours down there connected him with. And I tell you, for 90 minutes, almost 2 hours, he sat and talked to me, first time in a long time. And boy, the sheer excitement of seeing your children grow up, the role that athletics plays, and certainly his experience has been a good one athletically, but the idea of working on a variety of different projects and sharing with me down there at that particular school. And boy, I tell you, as a parent, it sure does make you feel good that your kids are growing up. And I didn't have to say a lot of words. Usually on this show, I end up asking a lot of questions and talking a lot. But for 90 minutes, I didn't have to really speak a lot. He was just sharing with me, and it was so exciting. And I know you've experienced that as a parent as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's great as your kids get older and you see them become their own people. Take a lot of pride in that. And I guess it's really what makes our jobs fun and also challenging at times is you're dealing with everybody else's babies too, and they love them just as much. So, yeah, but it's pretty nice when you get to see them. I tell people, though, hey, when you're going through those infant ages, you're like, oh, I just can't wait till we can sleep, or we don't have diapers, or can't wait till this. And you're always on point as a parent. There's always something that you're worried about and trying to help with, no matter how good they are. But, yeah, it's sure fun to watch them become young, successful adults.
All that went through my mind Sunday night as he was sharing with me his enthusiasm, excitement, Mick, was that I've only got about 5 more years of putting money in the Venmo for him. Hopefully. Well, here we are. Hopefully. And let's go in and we're going to talk about, boy, I tell you, we will talk about a variety of different things today. We'll talk about rule changes. We'll talk about competitive balance and trust, things we always talk about, transfers and the movement of athletes. Always a very, very interesting time for you and athletic directors in the state of Washington, really for the high school athletic directors all over the country, as we've seen and as you have seen. And obviously in Washington, D.C. today, I believe that there is hearings going on in regards to the political issue around what the definition is for girls sports. And we've had some of that talk going on, and it continues to be an issue. And certainly I know that in the next 6 months, as we continue our journey in these conversations, I'm sure we'll hear more. But let's mark it here like a director. Let's mark it right here with a look at some of the rule changes the WIAA is starting to look into, and they've released a set of proposed amendments for the 2026 Representative Assembly. And give us an idea of some of the problems or some of the challenges that are coming from these amendments, and trying to solve some of these things system-wide.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's a personal want or desire, or a segment of our population wants something. If you look through the 35, there's some that are very, very specific to a small segment of our membership, and some apply to everybody. And sometimes they are problems. I mean, we deal with that with our handbook on an ongoing basis. We're on technicalities and loopholes and when we want to be fair, and it's, sometimes it's really frustrating. But that's our job, is to continue to evolve and evaluate and do that. And, most people aren't doing it out of spite or anything. They're doing it based on their situations and what's there. So it's challenging at times. So the rep assembly, the rulemaking process, gives us a chance to address some of that in a fair and systemic way. So, again, it could go from something that impacts a very small segment to seismic shifts in systems. Some of the classification ones are pretty significant shifts. Some impact private schools or small schools, or some impact schools in certain parts of the state. And it's definitely challenging. And our mantra has been, hey, don't complain about it, do something about it. And the amendment process allows that. So people are taking advantage of it. It's great. This is how it should be.
When the public hears amendments, it can sound political, and we all remember that little commercial that Schoolhouse Rock did. You're too young to remember that, back in the mid 1970s.
No,
I'm just a bill. I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill sitting here on Capitol Hill, and it was such that was such an interesting part. And I hope that I believe that was on the ABC television network, but I know that a number of groups, I certainly I rented the DVDs and played them for my kids at Highline when I was coaching them. I thought that was such an effective way to learn certain things, and hopefully they can hang on to them. But as adults, we hear amendments and all these different things, and it can sound so political. How do you, in plain language, and Mick, I know you've done this before, you've discussed how rules become rules in the WIAA. Would you like to go over that again for us? There we go. Thank you, Daniel. There he is.
Yeah, rules, we go through this process once a year. So any 5 schools in our membership, so again, we're over 800, a little over 420 at the high school and 400 plus or minus at the middle school level. 5 schools can get together and propose an amendment or a bill, right? But essentially an amendment. And or the executive board can propose them. And then it goes out to what we call our rep assembly. That's a total of 53 voters, 35 at the high school, 18 at the middle school. It's proportional between our 6 regional districts, and based on population, which are pretty balanced now. And they vote in April on these, and they have to get 60% of those votes. So if it's something that impacts high school, middle school, 60% of 53 is 32, I believe. And then otherwise it's 60% of 35 if it's high school only, or 60% of 18 if it's middle school only. So so again, the membership picks who votes for them, and those individuals work with their leagues and their WI districts or geographical region boards, and they decide how. So we have our meeting to bring those to the floor coming up here in January. And then everybody will act on those starting or vote on them in April. So
if I am a parent, can I suggest something? Is the proper process to suggest something to the athletic director of maybe my school or the district, and maybe they carry that forward to me if I have an idea in mind?
Yep, absolutely. That's the place to go. And another way that our rules can change are by court decisions or laws, right? So Supreme Court is hearing 2 cases today related to gender identity, transgender athletes. And, when and if they rule on those could potentially change the laws of Washington, which would then change the rules for us. So we have internal control, and then there's the external control from the courts and the legislators.
What are the categories? Which categories tend to drive most of the debate? Is it around classification, eligibility, the public-private balance, sport-specific, or in your experience, what tends to come to the surface?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of them. It really depends on the year. 2 years ago, flag football was the big one. People, when it didn't pass the first time it was voted on, people want to know who voted against it and all that. Last year was the transgender gender identity advisory vote. People want to know how people voted. This year, to be determined. Last year, the transfer amendment had a lot of attention on it. And so I think it really depends. I think our classification amendments this year will draw a lot of conversation because that will impact schools and leagues, and which in turn then starts impacting allocations and state tournaments. And so there's a lot of variance in that.
How do you all sit down and determine after something has been passed? And obviously there's always a great deal of energy, similar like the little man that was sitting on the stairs there. He, in that video, as we recall, he becomes a law, and he's in this big grandiose thing now, and he's all sitting up straight and tall and proud that he's become a law after he was a bill. When a rule gets passed, Mick, how do you discover, or how do you measure the metrics? What are the measurements to say, hey, this actually made a difference?
Yeah, it really depends on each one. So we try to collect as much data to quantify it as best we can. So, for example, when some of the classification amendments passed a few years ago, we've been collecting data on how many schools that are able to move down classifications, or that are allowed to move down in appeals, how they do, how many make state of tournaments, how many play in semifinals, how many make championships. We do that for public-private. Mike started that well before I got here, tracking public-private success in postseason and access. And so it really depends. Like with the transfer one from last year, we've worked with our partners at Final Forms, and now we have a transfer portal. Not wide open free portal like what you see, but a portal on the computer that all transfers are put in. So we're going to be able to see how much movement there is by school and by area in total. We don't have comparative data before that. So that will take some time. And honestly, a lot of it is just in conversations with our membership. Are they seeing it as a positive or a negative or neutral? And so our staff gets out to a lot of those regional board meetings to listen in. We meet with league presidents 3-4 times a year to hear from them, and they provide feedback as well as our board.
Taking time to examine comparative data, that is one of the many things that Mick Hoffman does. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. He joins us here every other Tuesday, the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, where we have this wonderful forum called WIAA Primetime. And of course, that I believe that our man Tony B came up with that name, Primetime. And of course, that was before Deion Sanders became head coach at the University of Colorado. Of course, Deion was always Primetime, and we like to believe we are right up there with Primetime, developing that moniker. We believe it belongs to us, and for the specifics of basically discussing sports at the high school level in Washington State. And if you want to help make more broadcasts like this possible, you can donate today at Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio. It's Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio. I'm very familiar with this. I've become very familiar with this app, by the way. This app has become very familiar in our house. And I take collections from relatives, and I take it and I put it on Clemente and Araceli's Venmo accounts. So if you have a Venmo account and you would like to, and I will share this, I will be transparent about this. Neither Mick Hoffman or I, we don't take compensation for this program, and we appreciate that so much that Mick generously donates his time, and I certainly we feel that this is a contribution more than anything else, your time, your talent, and your treasure. And we believe that this is such an important thing to do to make sure that we are discussing these issues that may be out of place in the regular media, and certainly that's an interesting topic in itself. But if you want to have the opportunity to make more broadcasts like this possible at Rainier Avenue Radio.world, please donate to that account. And I believe there's also something called Shunpike. Rainier Avenue Radio.world/donate at Shunpike, whatever that is. I don't have a Shunpike account. I'm sure that Araceli in the future may come to me and say, Daddy, I've got a Shunpike, donate to that, and I will probably do it because she's my daughter. But please make a donation to support community radio, and which is so important here. And I tell you, the impact of this radio station. I'm getting calls from people all over the city recently from some of the broadcasts that we did back in the fall. I think there was a little political race going on, and people are following up in regards to that. So the impact of this radio station and what we do here is incredible, and we are only getting better at your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. The competitive balance. Classifications and trust, Mick Hoffman. Classification ranges are set on a multi-year cycle. What are the biggest unintended consequences classifications sometimes can create for competitive balance?
Yeah, regarding competitive balance, there's a couple, and that's what a couple of the amendments that you see this year are responding to. One is currently if a school building has a separate OSPI number, for alternative ed than their general OSPI number for the district or the high school. None of those students are counted towards their classification count. And the idea when that was passed was, most programs, most alternative ed students are not doing a lot of the mainstream activities of the school. Well, what was found or what's believed is that there are a few entities around the state that have very large alternative learning environments with separate OSPI numbers that have a high participation rate in students. So it allows them to maybe play down a classification and still have a high volume of participants. So people are thinking that's unfair. I would want to point out though, when, answering this question is tricky because just because you move down a classification doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier competition. And
right.
I think people could argue around here, 3A basketball and Seattle area is pretty darn good, and doesn't necessarily make it less competitive than 4A basketball anywhere else in the state. So, but that's one of the perceptions. Another one is our current classification system was originally set up with, you could deduct your free and reduced lunch amount that OSPI tracked for everybody, all public schools, from your student count for classification, which could be up to 40%. So even if you're 95% free and reduced lunch, the most you could deduct was 40%. Now that has changed. It's still there, but free and reduced lunch coming out of COVID, there's a change in policy at OSPI and the feds where school districts could become 100%. So that metric was no longer a viable option for us. So what we had to do instead was we used the direct cert, and there's a belief that maybe that number isn't as effective. And so there's an amendment to eliminate that and just do adjustments through appeals. It'll increase the volume of appeals for our district directors and our board, but it might be a more fair way for competitive equity. So that's up for discussion right now with the membership as well. So sometimes when you're doing it, things change, and then you got to continue to change. So,
it's really interesting. I've seen so many podcasts and talk shows recently in the Seattle area about a variety of different subjects, especially when it comes around this particular topic, the proposed amendments, the touch private school classifications. It's so funny because I'm a graduate of a fairly high profile graduate of a private school, although albeit it was a while ago. I coached and I was head coach at 2 public schools that struggled in the particular sport that I was in terms of enrollment and getting kids out and at Highline and having a private school right down the street. And then I'm a parent at a private school right now, and I'm thankful, Mick, and I'm thankful no one asked me to come on the shows because, as you know, I have a variety of different opinions, and since no one asks me, it's great that I can keep my opinions to myself because I think some of them are very pointed. However, keeping the conversation focused on fairness and student opportunity and not the stereotype or the school type stereotype. How do you work to keep that conversation balanced when we're looking at some of these proposed amendments around the private schools in the state?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's where we fall back on trying to use data to quantify it, right? Because so in general, over the last decade or so, what we've seen is private schools make up, once upon a time it was about 17% of the membership. It's up to 21, a high of 21. I think it's settled around 20 again now this year. And they were winning proportionally about the same number of state championships. So, data, you can do a lot of things with data, but data shows, okay, they win a proportional amount of championships to the number of schools. The issue that we're seeing in some of these other amendments that are out this year is that in certain sports at certain levels, it's not spread proportionally 21% across all sports and all levels. So, at some of our lower levels or mid levels in certain sports, there's a much higher success rate for private schools than for public schools. On the flip side, there's a lot of sports and a lot of different classifications where there's a much higher level of success for public rather than private. So I think that's part of it. I think there's a lot of perceptions around that. A lot of it, people start talking about recruiting, and what we experience is there's a lot of recruiting in public and private school. I mean, that people are selling the programs, or there's really good programs that draw students, whether they're public or private. There's more flexibility in going out and getting students, but you in a private or independent school, but you also don't have a guaranteed student base either. And so, Running Start is offered to 10th graders to 12th graders in public school, but not private school. So there's advantages, disadvantages in all of them. And I think some of the amendments are brought forward by folks who feel like there's some places that it needs to be tweaked. So, we basically tried to do it through data and not through emotion wherever we can.
Mick, this is something I think you and I have talked about before as well. I think sometimes perception is greater than reality. I think a lot of people jump to conclusions, and I think in any public forum where people get emotional over the outcomes or some of the results, and certainly high school sports presents that on a variety of different levels, generational levels, alumni levels, parent levels, and obviously sometimes the blowback comes straight back to Renton and right through the doors of the WIAA offices. And I was just wondering if there was one thing that you could change about how the public understands the WIA's work towards competitive balance and decisions, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that people assume we have this all-assuming power, and we actually have very limited authority for that. Leagues schools get to choose whether they opt up. There's rules that allow them to opt down. They get to make their own leagues, and so that the idea of member driven, we hear about member owned credit unions, but the members aren't in there working it. There's people, working it that are professionals. Ours is really member driven, and we are working with our membership to help guide that and then implement what they want. And so, we're dealing with some really difficult cases right now around eligibility, and we're trying to be as fair as we can. There's people who try to game the system, there's people who are just caught up in the system, there's people trying to understand the system, and so we're constantly having to tweak the system, and sometimes people beat the system until we can close the system. And so it's not that we're not trying to give anybody an advantage. We want it as fair as possible. That's our goal. And we're working within the rules. We're not going to, ignore the rules. We're not going to bend the rules. And then we got to go to work on fixing and adjusting the rules with our membership when possible. So that's probably the biggest misconception is, we just ignore things or we don't care. And there's a lot of things we can't share, especially around eligibility cases where there's some horrific things that happen to kids at times. And, we have to work through that. So, and try to be fair and protect kids wherever we can.
It sounds like being a dad in a traditional family. Clemente Cotto comes and says to me, geez, I thought you were all-knowing, and I thought you were the one who was making the decisions. And I said, no, Sarah makes 97, 98% of those decisions. maybe closer to 99. And he's like, why? And it's because she's trying to protect my health. So she makes those decisions, and I just sit back and guide it from the dad perspective, Clemente. So you'll have to negotiate with your mama.
Yeah.
And here's the next one, and we'll kind of carry this into the next segment of the show. Transfers and the athlete movement, and obviously this is one that has become so sensitive. And I went online today and I read a couple of articles, and there are so many. It's almost like we're back to the beginning of the country. We have all these little journals and periodicals and people writing things now, which I guess is good as long as it's accurate and as long as it's fair. But Washington has discussed and implemented changes around transfer eligibility and windows. What was the real world issue that some of these policies or policy was trying to address?
Yeah, I mean, ask again, Juan. I'm sorry, I was reading a different question on the ones you sent me. So,
right. Take your time.
Which question are we on again? I'm sorry.
We're in this section C, question 8. Yeah.
So the biggest thing that I was still looking at the one on what we would change, magic wand time. The biggest thing we have is school choice. We're a choice state, and how do you allow for families and schools to have that opportunity, especially after they start at a school and then they realize this other opportunity exists in programming, some type of educational program, without going to an NCAA portal system, right? That's what we've been struggling with. And that's why I think our new transfer amendment does is it gives students that one-time transfer. It's really based around academics. You finish your school year at your current school, you move before the next school year starts or the next fall football season starts, and it gives you the opportunity to go and experience a new educational system and honor school choice. So again, because that's really the basis of our public school system in Washington, families like to have those opportunities. At the same time, allow eligibility for varsity level. So I think it's also really important that people understand I think it's really important people understand with that the whole goal is that we have the ability for kids to compete at the JV level, even when they're not varsity eligible, right? Not every state does that. And so with the school choice, so it's really educating people on that. So.
And we know those are challenging issues, and making sure that kids have an opportunity. And once again, we provide those opportunities to be heard on this community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. But to do that, we have to have a Profit Center update, which we have usually 27 minutes into the show. So Daniel is going to lead us into that. When we come back, we'll follow up with more questions with Mick Hoffman, the WIAA Executive Director on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
A new law is helping people save more money on prescription drug costs. You may also be able to save. With Medicare's Extra Help program, your premium costs can be zero and your out-of-pocket expenses are low. Who should apply? Single individuals earning less than $23,000 a year, or married couples earning less than $31,000 a year. Even if you don't think you qualify, you should still check out this program. Visit ssa.gov/extra help. Medicare costs are covered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Hey y'all, it's Traffic Jam with Kareem.
Thursday at 4 p.m.
Hey, Traffic Jam.
Rainier Avenue Radio, download the app so you don't miss out what's popping, what's cracking, what's happening. It's your boy, Cream the Dream, on another beautiful week on here on Traffic Jam in Seattle. I hope you guys doing what you're supposed to do, being you're supposed to be. I got a good show for y'all, a lot to talk about, you know, Kareem the Dream, keep up with everything.
Get your entertainment news with Kareem on the Traffic Jam, Thursday at 4 p.m.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Black generational wealth. For a long time, that's been a dream that needs to see reality. For hundreds of years, Black people have been in the United States and have suffered for it. We built this country, but have not yet really seen the dream come alive and what that means for Black people and people of color. This is going to take some time and some work and a lot of sacrifice, but people of color have always done that. And so it won't be any different. You don't need to do it alone, and you don't need to do it alone, because this is a community work project. It's going to take some rigor. It'll take a change in mindset for individuals and the community and the nation at large. This won't be simple, but that's okay. Nothing that's good or worthwhile is ever really simple.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Mondo Bancaro for Mondo's World. We will be discussing some interesting subjects. Sometimes I might even have some guests. So please listen to my show on Rainier Avenue Radio.
This winter, I don't want illness to get in the way of my holiday plan. That's why I got my annual flu and COVID shot. Everyone ages 6 months and older and get the flu and COVID shot each year. They make it less likely you'll get sick, and even if you do get infected, you won't get as sick. Free vaccines are available even if you don't have health insurance. For more information, visit kingcounty.gov/find a clinic. That's kingcounty.gov/find a clinic.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenue.world.
Welcome back to your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Juan, Cotto touching bases with you on WIAA Primetime, the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, with their executive director, our executive director of our state's high school organization, Mick Hoffman, who comes with us every other Tuesday, second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, and we have a little conversation about issues in high school athletics. Speaking of high school athletics here, people can probably see that I've got my Seahawk logo. We'll be going to the game this weekend versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Seattle Seahawks on their roster, and tell me if I'm wrong. And Daniel, hopefully you might be able to figure this out for me. I was trying to figure out how many athletes are competing in the NFL playoffs that went to Washington high schools, not colleges, university. A lot of those kids come from California and other places. I'm talking about specifically Washington high schools. I found two. One is a kid by the name of Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp played at Davis High School over in Eastern Washington, I believe in the Yakima Tri-Cities area. Cooper Kupp has turned out to be a pretty good player for the Los Angeles Rams and now for the Seattle Seahawks, and he will be representing the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday in the NFL playoffs. So we have Davis High School represented. And a young kid that we saw on Sunday evening who attended O'Day High School and Mount Si High School, where he actually graduated after the one my alma mater a little bit. But Jack Westover, who obviously I think a lot of us are familiar with, played at the University of Washington on that great run with Kalen DeBoer. And he is playing for the New England Patriots, and heard his name called a couple of times. Kind of a workman type of grunty tight end fullback type for the New England Patriots, and plays special teams. And he's out there. So those are the two that I am familiar with. And let's see. Oh, and the search engines is Riley Moss, Clavon Chasen, and Parker Washington. and maybe Daniel will dig up who they are currently playing for. So we have a couple of athletes out there in the NFL playoffs. Always great to see Washington athletes out there making an impact, Mick Hoffman.
Yeah, I mean, those are those unicorns. People worked incredibly hard, have some gifts, and took great advantage of it. It's impressive that many out of our state in relative size compared to others.
We were talking a little bit about the transfers and athlete movement. Always a topic of conversation. I'm sorry. We have what would we do without Daniel Bellis? Riley Moss plays for the Denver Broncos. Clavon Chasen plays for the New England Patriots, and Parker Washington plays for the Jaguars. Unfortunately, the Jags, their season ended on Sunday to Buffalo, but we're thinking about all of our Washington athletes and the impact that they had and great seasons as they've had. So hopefully providing inspiration for all of our young men who participate in these sports here in Washington State. What does fair mean? And this is a conversation we touched on this at the top of the show with parenting. It seems like for the last 18 years I've had this conversation. What does fair mean here? Protecting competitive integrity, honoring family mobility, limiting recruiting pressure, and goodness sakes, we're in high school for crying out loud, or some combination, Mick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a true combination of all that. And it's finding a way that everybody gets something where no harm is being done. You may not be getting what you want. I think it's very tricky. And so, especially on those topics, the ones that you list on the question, I mean, there's a lot of issues that are coming from all over the place, intersecting, and being able to find a way to meet people's basic needs, provide as much beyond that as you can without, taking away opportunity from others. So,
what do you say about a student athlete? And I certainly have been in this situation before as a coach, who the student athlete starts to feel trapped by a situation. And I'm sure as a coach, you experienced this, and the community that fears open enrollment, the transfer portal. I had kids when I was at Franklin High School in Highline. Certainly they were going, it seemed, from school to school to school, and you're working with the athletic director and trying to show people that your program is one that will be good for them. You think it's good for, and going back to the fair thing, you believe it's good for all the students that participate, and you're going to work with them and help them develop. And, certainly we see the value in that, but, people are always kind of looking around for the best deal. And how do we represent what is best to the kids who feel sometimes trapped by that situation?
Yeah, I think, again, it really taking a realistic look at that situation. Is it because it's just challenging or difficult, or is it really unfair? And finding a compromise with that. And yeah, maybe there's something that appears to be better or something that's out there. Now, if it's a situation where a rule is unfair, right, in a situation, I mean, we tried to live within the rules. There's loopholes in all our rules, or issues, unintended outcomes, and we try to mitigate that where we can. But for the most part, I think people need to really get a little wider perspective, step away, take a look at it, and then find out, is this fair, maybe not favorite? And I think that's a perspective issue.
Let's get out of that and let's go to some of the more exciting things that we've been talking about here recently. And we're going to section D in the note that I sent to you in regards to emerging sports and the new front door to participation. And Mick, I think I told you this, and I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna give you a chance to kind of expound on this because my son, it seems, forgot his key, so I've got to go open up the door in the middle of your answer. But I'm going to pretend to listen to it. I will be here. Pretend I'm right here. But this is exciting because it kind of goes back to what sports is meant to be. I couldn't believe how excited some of my O'Day brethren are. They are coaching in this girls' flag football.
Yeah.
And of course, with O'Day guys, they're probably doing something to get girls there. But Mick, it is so exciting to hear about how Daniel, take that out of there. I love my guys. We know that. But this is so exciting, Mick, that we are having this conversation about a new sport which has been so well received, and a number of young women who are participating. And the results, and these gals are out there playing in the real winter weather. They didn't get the benefit of starting in the spring, or in the summer-like conditions. They're out there in the rain and in the cold weather, and throwing passes and catching touchdowns. And I was talking to the coaches, and they're talking cover 4 and blitzes. And they're talking running the air raid offense and some of the old Sid Luckman type of plays, balancing out the passing attack. It's really exciting to see how this has taken off. Tell us a little bit about how the girls' flag football is now on the docket in Washington State.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been really well received, and our participation numbers we'll see at the end of the season, but we're hearing in some cases, up to 90 to 100 girls turning out at some schools. So we know that's the exception, not the norm, but we've had more teams participate. I think we're over 130 now, and they're getting ready to go into their first postseason at the end of the month. And our first state championship will be held the weekend of February 13th and 14th at Federal Way High School. So Federal Way is hosting it at their beautiful stadium. So it's been really exciting. As you know, the Seahawks have been huge supporters of this, with the NFL continuing to provide grants and other opportunities for people. So we're really excited for the turnout, considering that we're in the middle of winter and most of us don't even want to go out and walk in that weather, and these young ladies are out there competing. So I think the other question that you had asked was, how did this come about? How do we get something like this sanctioned? What's the reality of it? And again, it really goes to our membership. That there's 2 ways of doing it. An amendment can be proposed by 5 schools and voted on, which in the second year of this amendment, our membership chose to vote for it. Narrowly failed the year before. The other way is a trial sports, where if 20% of our schools begin to offer a sport or activity, they can ask for a formal trial, and within 2 years' time, if they have 40% of our membership, then they are able to sanction it. So it can either go through the amendment process, the vote, or actually by demonstration of schools willing and able to sustain it. So those are the two different ways.
It's so exciting to have young women participating in football. And I know that there are other new sports that are constantly emerging, and esports and different things that are going on that you guys are all overseeing out of the Renton offices. And I'm wondering how people ask me, Juan, why do you wear 2 sets of glasses? I said, it's because I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm not losing my sight right now. But although I think one pair is going to be coming here pretty soon. How do you prevent these from becoming only schools, only for schools with resources? How do you make sure, for example, and we know this at some of the schools that we may consider lower income here in the city of Seattle, making sure that flag football is available to some of those girls. And we know that with the popularity of the game that they would probably want to participate. How are we making sure that there's equitable access to in all these different types of situations statewide?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is the process allows for that, where the schools are voting for it, right? And like in the case of flag football, it was started in Tacoma and Seattle, which has, a huge variance in socioeconomics within those communities. And they were able to sustain it, and they actually are the ones who grew that throughout the region and outside the city. And so, so our schools have to vote it in, and that's always one of the conversations they have. There's a few other activities or sports that people are interested in bringing in for a variety of reasons. haven't been approved. And part of the conversation in some of them is the cost to schools and the access for students in a club or preparation. So, and then that second way of 40% of the schools doing it, if 40% of the schools aren't willing or able to do it, then it tells us that there's an access issue. So,
what other emerging activities, esports, formats, unified sports expansion? You kind of touched on some of this. What are we seeing as going to be potentially the next in line? And how would you qualify those in terms of getting more students participating? What ultimately this is supposed to be about?
Yeah, I mean, again, those are the things that we're constantly trying is to get more students. And so, some of the activities that we are hearing about that we're hoping will come forward is chess is one, robotics, even though there's a cost. I mean, there's different various levels and cost to that they would be able to do. There's also the expanding unified sports and into existing sports as another way. Ultimate Frisbee is one that we're hearing some talking about. Pickleball, tumbling is one. Gymnastics participation is continuing to decrease by numbers and then also from facility limitations. So, maybe tumbling comes in and helps resolve some of that for kids who are interested in those. So, there's a lot of other potential ones that could come forward when and if our schools. The challenge for our schools right now is a lot of them are in funding situations where they're cutting budget. And so adding is difficult. So the fact that they approved flag football is pretty phenomenal. So
I tell you, I would be... I don't think Sarah Cotto would let me sit in the umpire's chair for a statewide pickleball tournament. I tell you, that's going to be that would be quite exciting for the kids. But I tell you, I can only imagine the behavior of certain people, especially people that we know. But that would be really, really interesting to see just with the passion around that particular sport. And I'm laughing, but I think people know where I'm going with that. You and I have touched on this as well, briefly, the media storytelling and the value of attention. The WIAA does such a great job of making sure that they are promoting things, and I have to commend the NFHS website and a variety of different ways that we are seeing the extraordinary talents of our kids in these communities throughout the state of Washington. And I know that the WIAA has been involved in building a broader statewide platform to share these like Varsity Sports Live. What's the mission, exposure, community turnout, equity for smaller schools or for all the schools, just to make sure that we are getting this information out in as many ways that we can so people can see it?
Yeah, whenever we bring partners on, we always ask them to include all our schools as best they can. And so, you specifically call out Varsity Sports Live here. They're predominantly work the Puget Sound area, and one of our requests of them was to do this statewide, all levels, and tackle and flag football, varsity and non-varsity, and so boys and girls basketball, and they were willing to do that. They sent out information to all schools asking them to fill it out so that they could highlight those. They're looking for great stories that tell inspirational stories from around the state. So, that's one of the things we always are working on, is that it involves all students. The NFHS network is part of that. The pick slots were available to everybody, not just the biggest schools, and so that they can people can watch their games from anywhere in the world. So the equity piece for our small schools to our remote schools to our less traditionally competitive schools, we're trying to take care of all of them. So.
Mick Hoffman is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, and he comes here the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. We have a conversation about what's going on with our high school athletic activities, our high school interscholastic activities more specifically, and also we have a good time sharing, and hopefully we provide an opportunity for people to learn more, because this is such an important topic, and the work of the WIAA really impacts every student throughout the state of Washington. To do this, we have an opportunity where you can make a donation on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We have a Venmo account there. We have and you can go Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio.world or Rainier Avenue Radio.world/donate. Every dollar matters. And we have so much that we do here at Rainier Avenue Radio, working with young people in the community. For so many, this is their first step in an opportunity to do something in the community, and also for those who would love to pursue a career in broadcast journalism or behind the scenes. I tell you, Daniel, growing up in Seattle, and I remember writing letters to Como TV, to different folks down there to try and get my foot in the door. And I wish that we had Rainier Avenue Radio. So Tony D does a great job of providing this service, and there's so many young people we have seen benefit from this program. We hope that people will take the time and make a donation, because the work that community does, that Tony B does, and Daniel B and so many that are involved in Rainier Avenue Radio really does impact the community. So that's my telethon message to everyone. And if you would like to make a donation, we'd appreciate it. And we really do. It really does impact young people in our area. How do you balance, Mick, increased visibility with the reality that sometimes teenagers make mistakes, and that's a part of education? So media growth doesn't become a pressure cooker, that they're just fighting through all of this attention and fighting through all of this media as they are going through their high school careers.
Yeah, I continue to say today's student has it really tough. I mean, everything can be captured on a phone or what have you, and broadcast to the world. And once it's out, it never goes away. So I think that is probably one of the greatest challenges for students. And I don't necessarily think it's like our media people, especially our more traditional or the new contemporary type media. There's still basic standards, but it's the stuff that can be caught from the stands. A kid at their worst moment, and I mean, you think about, there's still times where adults are making mistakes, so kids are going to make mistakes, and that we got to have some space and grace for them wherever we can. So that being said, there's small penalties, you learn from it and you move forward. So
do you think high school sports needs a shared media ethics conversation now, especially with all of the highlight clips and all of the social media clips? And I'm sure all the demands that are probably being placed on you all down there, your PR team. I'm sure that, geez, I see people at the state championship game, they're wearing their little vests like the Super Bowl. But do we need to have a conversation in terms of who, what, when, and how we are exposing this? Or is that something that you guys are already taking a look in and have an opportunity to work on?
Yeah, I mean, in today's world, media credentialing has become very challenging. So actually, I was reading an article about John Canzano, and they were talking to him about being an independent journalist, how he's getting credentials to the CFP. And he, he has 30 years of people interacting with him as a traditional mainstream journalist. In addition, he meets their requirements. And, we've continued to evolve and try to do ours because we want media there. We want coverage there. It'd be great if we could just let everybody in. They could all stand around the corner of the field and capture video or interview kids. But so we're trying to find a way to manage that as best we can, while at the same time, not creating total chaos around that. So, I mean, it's a real challenge in today's world, and it's, I think, continually evolving with technology.
The big picture, Mick, nationally, participation hit record highs, which is exciting considering the conversations that we were having 2 and 3 years ago after the pandemic, post-pandemic. But nationally, participations are hitting record highs in 2024, 2025. It looks like that's only going to grow into 2026. How do you interpret that? Is this a comeback, a cultural shift? Is this proof that schools and sports still anchor our community life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it verifies America's love with sport, number one. no matter what the sport is. And number two, I think it shows the value of keeping education-based sports in schools, because we're seeing, in certain sports, I mean, 7th grade is the age most kids are dropping out, 12, 13 years old, of club sports before they even get to high school sports. So the fact that we can capture the middle school and high school kid and keep them in there. And I think it's about playing for your school and your community. There's a lot of value and pride in that. I mean, I hear you talk about O'Day still as alumni, and now your son being there and all that. And so I think there's a strong emotional connection to that. And there's a sense of pride in representing your neighborhood.
If the superintendent of public instruction, let's say Chris Reckdahl, runs into you as you are down in Olympia, as you and I are both going to be down in Olympia. I don't think Chris Reckdahl will run into me and ask anything, but that's good. But you probably will get a couple of questions, or if any superintendent here in the state of Washington, where you're at, Mick, comes up and says, "Hey, what is the ROI? What is the return on investment in athletics here and activities?" Give me 60 seconds. What's the most compelling answer you could give them?
Yeah, my first year I had at a mandatory AD fall workshop, I asked them to introduce themselves and tell why they love their job. And I had an AD stand up and he said, "I run the most effective intervention program in my school." And that has stuck with me to this day. You figure for less than 2% of the budget, you have in most cases about 50% of your student body participating, and the data from attending 21 more days of school to life choices outside of school to GPA to graduation rates to the amount of females in C-suite jobs in Fortune 500 companies, the data continues to grow. So the return of investment, I would challenge, and I share this with our superintendents and school directors, I would challenge you to do a study what has a better ROI than your education-based activities and athletics.
Just to make sure that I get all of my alma maters represented here.
There you go.
Not just the Odays. And this will be my last question for you today. Give me the single most important North Star for the WIAA in 2026. Growth, safety, equity, trust, or sustainability?
Yeah, I think all of those 5 are important. And I would say currently it's sustainability, because growth, safety, equity, and trust all fall underneath those, every single one of them. And so because they all fall underneath them, sustainability, and with our schools looking at some really difficult financial choices here in the next couple of months as they go through their budgeting season, I think it's critical that we're able to sustain what we have so we can grow, because we know we can help keep kids safe in this thing. We know that we bring equity as best possible in sport, and people are beginning to learn to trust that, hey, we're going to do what we say.
Mick, as usual, it seems like we say it every time you're on here. Thank you so much for your candor. Thanks so much for being forthright. Thanks for accepting our questions and spending a little time with us. Daniel, thank you. And I know the audience is saying the same thing. Geez, Juan, you're trying to move. Your head is so much bigger than Mick's. And I think just physically maybe it is. So I'm trying to do the best I can to make those adjustments. But nevertheless, Mick, we really do appreciate you being here. We appreciate, Daniel, all you do to make this show run smoothly. And we hope you will take us up on that Venmo. There's a little donation tag just above my head on my screen. But we wish all of you the very, very best in 2026. We wish all of you just a safe and healthy new year as we're moving into the 250th year of the country. And we look forward to seeing you on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon again.
Thanks, Juan.